About a year ago, I was driving back from visiting my girlfriend around midnight, and I was on the route I usually take, which is mostly back roads through farmland. When I was about halfway home, I noticed a pair of headlights behind me. That's not unusual, but what stood out was how long they stayed there. Same distance, same speed, and no attempts to pass me. At first I figured they were just on cruise control, but after about 10 minutes I started testing them out. I slowed down a little, and they slowed down. I sped up, and they sped up with me. That's when I started getting nervous, because something didn't feel right at all. There's a small gas station on that route about 20 minutes from my house that stays open very late, so I decided I'd pull in, just to be around other people. As I turned into the station, the car behind me kept going. I remember feeling stupid for getting all worked up, and while I was there, I got gas, used the restroom, grabbed a drink, and left a few minutes later. But as soon as I pulled back onto the road, they were there again. The same headlights were behind me. I don't know how they turned around that fast, or where they went, but they were behind me again within seconds as I pulled off from the gas station. This time, they started to get closer. I could barely see the driver because of the glare, but the car itself looked older and kind of beat up. I decided I shouldn't drive home right then. Instead, I drove straight to the police station in my town. I didn't even call. I just pulled into the lot and waited to see what was going to happen. The car followed me all the way there, then immediately turned around in the parking lot and left. I sat in my car for a good 5 minutes before going inside. The officer I talked to said they keep an eye out, but I couldn't give them any more details other than the car was big and black. I never heard anything back from them. Maybe it was nothing, but I still think about how they waited for me at the gas station, and it gives me the chills. I used to work overnight stocking at a big retail store in my small town. One of my main jobs was taking cardboard out to the big compactor behind the building. Usually I went with someone else, but occasionally all of the other stockers are busy, so I sometimes do it by myself. On this night, I didn't feel like waiting and decided to get it done myself to save everyone else some time. It was around 2:30 in the morning, midway through my shift. The back alley of the store is completely dark except for one overhead light just near the compactors. Beyond that, it's just a line of trees that stretch for miles around my town. As I was tossing boxes in, I heard something crunch behind me, almost like footsteps in gravel. I turned around expecting to see another employee, but there was no one there. Weirded out, but almost done with the boxes, I brush it off and hurry up, figuring maybe it was just something falling or shifting in the alley. Then I heard it again, but it felt closer this time. I kind of froze in shock and fear, and I didn't turn around right away. I don't know why, but I stood there listening. It was heavy enough to just know it wasn't any kind of animal, and when I finally turned around, there was a guy standing just outside of the light. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I can tell he was faced towards me. I asked if he needed help, trying to sound as normal as possible, but my voice was shaking a bit. He didn't answer and just took one small step towards me. I dropped everything and ran back inside. Luckily, I had propped the door open, so I got in quickly. I went straight to my manager in her office and we called the police. They showed up around 20 minutes later and searched the area around our store, but didn't find anyone. From that point on, management made it a rule that no one goes out back alone anymore. Nothing like this has ever happened at our store again, but to this day, I still refuse to take the cardboard out. During summer break, while I was in college, I used to babysit for a family that lived in a really quiet neighborhood on the edge of our already small town. It was one of those areas where houses are spaced out just enough that at night, everything feels super still. I'd been watching their kids for a couple months already, so I was familiar with the house and them. The parents were super routine-oriented, which honestly made the job so much easier. The kids were always in bed by 9, and I just got to hang out the rest of the night. This night in particular, I got the kids to bed around 9:15. Both of them went down to bed without any issues. I checked their closets like they always asked me to before bed, and left their doors slightly open so that I could hear if they got up in the middle of the night. After that, I went downstairs, turned on the TV, and just relaxed. Around 10:30, I heard something upstairs and it sounded like a door closing. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to catch my attention over the TV. At first, I figured one of the kids had gotten up, so I muted the TV and listened. Nothing else followed. No footsteps and no voices. Still, I went upstairs to check if they were all right. Both the kids were fast asleep in the same positions I left them in, and their doors were still open exactly how I left them. That's when I turned to notice something that made my stomach immediately drop. The parents' bedroom door was closed. I was almost positive it had been open earlier, as I even remembered glancing into it first when I arrived, as the light from the hallway hit the dresser mirror just right to bleed into the hallway. Now it was completely shut. I stood there for a few seconds just staring at it, trying to convince myself I was misremembering. I walked a little closer and listened, but there was nothing. I reached for the handle and then stopped. Something just didn't feel right. I can't really explain it, but every instinct I had was telling me not to open that door, and I felt butterflies in my stomach, and not in the good way. So instead I backed away and went straight into the kids' room. I woke them up as calmly as I could and told them that we were going outside for a minute. They were confused, but they listened and followed. I grabbed my phone, ushered them downstairs, and out the front door. Once we were outside, I locked the door behind us and called the parents first. They told me to call the police immediately, and they were on their way back home. While we were waiting, I put the kids in my car and I stayed outside to keep looking at the windows. At one point, I thought I saw movement upstairs, like a shadow passing by the hallway. The police showed up about 10 minutes later and went inside to check. They cleared the house room by room, but when they came back out, they told me the back door was wide open. I know I had shut and locked the door earlier. Nothing was taken and nothing was broken, but someone had definitely been inside. I never babysat there again, and the family moved houses to the other side of town a few months after this occurrence. It still makes me anxious just thinking about it, and I have a really hard time babysitting other families to this day. When I was in college, I lived in a small apartment complex that was pretty far from campus, but offered a shuttle that took us there and back. It wasn't in the best area, but it was a lot cheaper than the one close. One night around 1 a.m., I heard someone knocking on our door. It wasn't frantic pounding, just slow and steady knocking. I nervously got up and looked at the people, but I couldn't see anyone. I figured maybe it was someone at the wrong apartment, so I just put the chain lock on and made sure my deadbolt was locked and then forgot about it. A few minutes later, it started again, with the same slow knock. This time I yelled through the door and asked who it was, as I was in our kitchen near the door at the time. There was no response. I looked again through the people for a moment, and that's when I realized I couldn't see anyone outside because whoever it was standing off to the side in the entryway out of view. I saw a tiny sliver of the side of a very tall person as I felt my stomach drop. I stayed completely quiet after that and crept away from the door slowly. I stayed by the door but didn't make a sound. About 5 minutes later, I heard loud footsteps walking away. The next morning, I checked outside, and there were scratch marks around the door handle, almost like someone had been trying to pry it open quietly. Since then, I always get spooked when the door knocks and it's dark out. I know deep down that person did not have good intentions when they came to my door that night. When I was in high school, I worked as a delivery driver for my best friend's family's local pizza place. One night, I got an order that was way out on the edge of our delivery area. It was in the middle of nowhere outside of town. I'd dropped some pizzas off around there before, but I didn't recognize the address at all. I enjoyed taking these far-out orders on slow nights because I could just listen to my music. When I eventually got close to the address, it looked to be a single house surrounded by the woods. No lights were on at all, so I double-checked the address, but it was the right place. I'd read a lot of stories about how things happen to stupid delivery drivers who don't have any common sense. but I was a young kid and I thought nothing could hurt me, so I went up and knocked on the door anyways. Nothing happened at first. I had just waited a couple of minutes, but no one came to the door, and I heard nothing inside. As I turned to leave, I heard something behind the house, like movement beyond the trees. I put the pizza on the porch and walked to the driveway in order to peek over to the side of the house where I heard the rustling. Nothing was there, so I called the number on the order and it went straight to voicemail. I got back into my car and that's when I heard a gunshot. It sounded like it was fired right next to my car and scared me half to death. I peeled out of the driveway as fast as I could and called the store. My boss informed me that he thinks the order was placed with a stolen credit card, as the payment had just been rescinded. Apparently, this wasn't the first time that addresses on that street had been used for fake orders. I don't know who was out there that night, and I don't know where that shot came from, but I'm glad I didn't stick around much longer to find out. Years ago, I was purchasing a new piece of land across the country, and I had a lot of PTO I needed to burn by the new year, so I decided to take a cross-country road trip, as I had never gotten the chance to see a lot of the states myself. The first time I stopped on the way, it was at a shady motel, but it was close to a national park, and I was looking forward to seeing it the next day. I got in around 9 p.m. and was asleep by 11. At around 3 a.m., I awoke to someone trying to open my door, rather violently. The handle was rattling, and it was getting more and more aggressive. I sat up in bed, completely frozen, not knowing what to do. Then I heard the voice say, "Housekeeping." I looked over to make sure I was right, and it, in fact, was 3 a.m. I didn't respond to the voice, and after a few seconds the rattling just stopped. But then I heard footsteps pacing outside of my door for at least 5 minutes. Eventually, it stopped completely too, and by 6 a.m., I had fallen asleep after trying to stay up as long as possible, but I didn't hear anything the rest of the night. That next morning, I went and asked the front desk about it. They told me that they have never had overnight housekeeping, and I felt dumb for even asking that question. To this day, I still prefer to stay in nicer hotels from now on, and I've never been back to that town. I live in the Midwest, and this happened to me last winter during a pretty bad snowstorm. I was driving home from work late, and the roads were already getting slick. At one point, I hit a patch of ice and slid right into a shallow ditch on the side of the road. At first, I was really scared because it had never happened to me before. My car wasn't actually damaged at all, besides some tiny scratches, but it was stuck and I needed to tow out of the ditch. It was one of those rural stretches where you might see a car every 10 to 15 minutes if you're lucky, and unfortunately, all of that around me was snow and darkness. I called AAA, but they told me it could be at least an hour because of the weather and other people that needed help. So I just sat there with the engine running, trying to stay warm. After about 20 minutes, I saw headlights approaching. A pickup truck slowed down and pulled over a few yards ahead of me, and a short, stubby man got out and walked back towards my car. At first, I felt relieved. I figured he was just being a good Samaritan. He came up to my window, and I cracked it open slightly to hear him. He asked if I needed help, and I told him I was waiting on a tow truck. He nodded, but didn't leave. Instead, he kept talking. It was a normal conversation at first. He was asking where I was coming from and if I was okay. But then the questions got progressively weirder. He asked if anyone knew where I was and if I lived nearby. Then he asked if I lived with anyone. That's exactly when I felt the vibe of this interaction shift. I told him my dad was on the way and should be there any minute. That wasn't true, but it was the first thing that I can think of. This guy just stared at me for a few seconds, and then his whole demeanor changed. He kind of smiled, but it didn't look friendly in any way, and it looked more like he was thinking something over. He stepped back from the car and said, "Yeah, I can't really help you then." And just like that, he turned around and walked back to his truck. He didn't offer to push the car, didn't check anything, just left. As he drove off, I noticed he slowed down a little further up the road, almost like he was considering stopping again, but he just kept going. About 10 minutes later, the actual tow truck showed up, and the driver was a middle-aged guy who immediately asked if anyone else had stopped. When I told him about the truck, his expression changed. He told me that the same vehicle had been reported earlier that night, bothering other drivers who were stranded. Apparently, the situation sounded almost identical. He told me I did the right thing, telling him someone was coming. I didn't even realize how bad it could have been until he said that. Looking back, I don't think he stopped to help me at all. I think he stopped to see if I was all alone, and that really scares me. To preface this story, I'm a petite girl in my 20s, and I'm a nurse. Recently, my shift has changed at work, so now I typically go to the gym late at night. It's a 24-hour place, and hardly anyone goes after midnight. This happened while I was there exceptionally late one night, after I had some cleaning to do at home before I left. After my warm-up at the gym, I realized I was the only person there. Later on, I was on a stair-stepper facing a wall of mirrors, and I noticed someone behind me. It was a man standing close to the entrance. He wasn't working out or anything, just standing there, and it looked like he was watching me. I got off the machine and moved to the treadmills in another area of the gym. I was anxious to see that he followed me, and he was still watching me at a distance. Eventually, after 15 minutes of this, I grabbed my stuff and headed for the exit. As I walked out, he grabbed my arm a few feet from the door. I gasped loudly, and he just looked and smiled at me. "Leaving already?" he said. I didn't respond. I just pushed him off and left, praying he didn't follow me. I grabbed my pepper spray from my bag just in case, and when I got outside, I sprinted to my car and locked it as soon as I got inside. I sat there for a minute, and when I looked back, he was standing inside the class, still watching me. I called the gym and canceled my membership the very next day.